Not too long ago, Warner Brothers announced that Keanu Reeves Constantine is getting a sequel 17 years after the movie came out. Since then, I've been wanting to watch it to find an answer to the question we all probably had when this news was announced. Does Constantine really need a sequel? However, I held off for the sake of being able to make a video about Constantine in October. I don't know, there's just something about demons, angels, exorcisms, and John Constantine that screamed October or Halloween to me. And now that I've watched Constantine, I can easily say that I like this movie. It's not bad, it's not terrible, and it's not great, but for a movie that came out in 2005, it's definitely good. However, I can entirely understand why Constantine got mixed reviews at the time of its release. If you've never watched Constantine, it's basically a murder mystery plot with supernatural elements and religious themes. While that may or may not sound interesting to you, Constantine may not live up to its full potential for a lot of people. For reference, Constantine is a slow burner. This movie likes to do a lot of setup by asking a lot of questions and allowing Constantine to take his time to find the answers he needs to solve his curiosities. More often than not though, this requires Constantine to explore supernatural ideas or concepts, and the exploration of them typically leads to yet another question. Naturally, this leads to the movie feeling incredibly formulaic after a while, and during this formulaic format, which admittedly still does work for this movie, this film also likes to throw a lot of information regarding the supernatural rules or regulations for Constantine's universe at the viewer. Now that shouldn't be a bad thing considering the viewer needs to know these things because they are necessary to the overarching plot, but there is a massive downside to this aspect of Constantine. Unlike a lot of the superhero movies that I've reviewed on my channel, the exposition dumps in Constantine are far too complicated for anybody to care about. It's not even like the placement of the exposition dumps is necessarily bad, it's just that there are so many overly wordy bits and pieces of information that you need to listen to understand why Constantine can't simply do something or what's going on in the moment, that all of it just blends together, making all of the exposition mostly unmemorable by the end of the movie. Honestly, it doesn't help that Constantine himself often explains a lot of these supernatural rules throughout the movie. Look, like a lot of people, I do like Keanu Reeves, but in this movie, he feels so one-dimensional. Constantine's only personality trait is misery. He's miserable because he's young and close to death due to him smoking so much despite being warned at an early age to not smoke. He's miserable because his soul is doomed to hell. He's miserable because he has to deal with Angela, one of the core characters of this movie, due to her sister's passing eventually making its way to Constantine. It's just nothing but misery from Constantine, the character, not the movie. It begins to get old after a while. I hate to compare Matt Ryan's iteration of Constantine from the Arrowverse to Keanu's Constantine, considering I'd be comparing a character from one movie to a fully fleshed out character over multiple shows with multiple seasons, but I almost have to do so to get my point across. Part of what makes Matt Ryan's take on the character so beloved is the over-the-top flair that he brings to John Constantine. When Constantine is sharing the screen with the many Arrowverse characters that we know of, he takes up the spotlight even if he's sharing the scene with the entirety of the Arrowverse. He has this presence to him that's both hard to ignore and hard to not love. He's funny and enthusiastic, and has this way of making light of a shitty situation because he knows more often than not he can probably solve the problem. It especially shows when he's doing a spell in the middle of a scene to save the day.
Hate to be the one to say this, but what if something goes wrong?
Oh, don't worry. If things go wrong, then we'll all be too dead to care.
I'm sure you guys get the point by now. There's just so much more flair, enthusiasm, and personality to Matt Ryan's John Constantine that, in comparison, Keanu's Constantine feels far flatter or more monotonous. He spends a lot of time thinking, pondering, and staring into space as he tries to figure out what's the solution to his current problem throughout the movie. And unfortunately, even though his personality makes sense due to the context of Constantine's story, you can't help but want more. You can't help but wish that there was a moment where Constantine goes from being this down on his luck protagonist who's miserable with his life to a protagonist who's willing to put his bullshit aside so he could spend more time doing what's right. Instead, it almost feels like watching Spider-Man without Peter Parker having his moment of realization where he decides that he wants to be a hero and take on the mantle of Spider-Man. It's just a bit frustrating because you can see the glimpses of Constantine's potential when he isn't purposely being rude to Angela, or when he's dealing with the half-breeds, angels, or demons in his universe. He has his small hero moments where he's using his powers that make you want to cheer him on. He has his moments where he's finally helping Angela and you can't help but think, oh, okay, he's finally growing as a character. However, there never really feels like there's a full commitment to giving Constantine the type of character arc or character growth until the very end of the movie. Fortunately though, these complaints that I have about Constantine don't entirely ruin the movie for me. Honestly, I actually think there are multiple positive things about this movie that legitimately outweigh my complaints. The first one is this movie's visual effects. The visual effects hold up so well that there are multiple moments where I had to remind myself that this movie came out in 2005. Are there moments where the visual effects look rough? Yeah. Of course. To give a prime example of that, there's a scene towards the latter half of the movie where there's a focus on a demon baby coming out of a woman's body, and it looks uncomfortable as hell. It's not even just because of how weird the CGI looks, it's just because the scene is uncomfortable all around. There's also another scene at the very beginning of the movie where Constantine is doing an exorcism, and not only is the scene well done, but they were proud enough of their visual effects to showcase a fully CGI demon in daylight. You know, you'd think that you'd have a bit of a reaction to the dated CGI, but honestly, you don't. That's how good this movie's visual effects are for a movie that was released in 2005. Along with that, there are multiple moments such as when Constantine finally decides to use his powers to see the supernatural side of the world that are legitimately breathtaking. This movie is one of the rare movies where you can't help but appreciate the sheer amount of love that went into the visual effects. It goes such a long way at uplifting such a key part of this movie. Naturally, this finally brings me to Constantine's story. Constantine is one of the rare superhero movies that actually has a well thought out story with a plot twist that not only feels earned but genuinely shocked me as well. Here we go, guys. To summarize Constantine, a cop's sister dies. The cop doesn't believe the cause of death, so she chases down Constantine. Constantine doesn't want to help. Why? It's because Constantine is literally dying. Oh, and he's doomed to hell as well, but who cares about that? Constantine eventually decides to help her. They go on a supernatural journey together. The cop ends up unlocking supernatural powers. They fight a couple of demons and half-breeds together. Constantine almost dies and begins to ascend to heaven. Lucifer gets pissed, brings him back down to earth, leaves, and then Gabriel reveals that it was him all along, not Agatha. Constantine cuts Gabriel's wings and walks away as a hero, and Angela meets him on a rooftop. This cues a terrible monologue by Constantine about how much he's grown throughout the movie. Cue end credits with the most generic rock music you've ever listened to, and an end credits scene. Plot twist, Constantine's unimportant best friend who dies and is played by Shia LaBeouf becomes an angel or demon or something to that nature. I don't know, it's probably another supernatural rule, law, or regulation that'll be explained in the sequel, assuming Shia LaBeouf comes back, and that is Constantine summarized for you guys. Now, let me tell you why I appreciate this movie's story despite it being a slow burn. This movie is so patient with what it's trying to do because it's trying to achieve a very rare thing that we barely see in superhero movies: a story with two sides. On one hand, you have the real world side of things where Angela and Constantine are detectives. On the other hand, you have the supernatural side where Constantine has to confront angels, demons, and half-breeds, basically a human who's part angel or part demon, on his own because they all play a role in Angela's sister's death. What makes the supernatural side of things interesting is the fact that Constantine is public enemy number 1 in the supernatural world. No one in the supernatural world, whether it's Balthazar, Gabriel, or Lucifer, likes him. They're all pretty much praying for Constantine's downfall, which makes my favorite aspect of this movie so much better. I love the final act of Constantine so much. It is legitimately fantastic. Watching Constantine and Angela team up to basically become demon hunters was so much fun. Constantine took Balthazar down effortlessly, even though this movie makes you think he's the main villain throughout the entirety of this movie. Lucifer makes an amazing entrance in the final act, which is probably the best moment of this movie, even though he's only in it for a couple of minutes. Finally, the plot twist is perfectly crafted in this movie, and I rarely get to say that about a superhero movie. As I watched Constantine, I actually hit a point where I began to get concerned because I thought Constantine was pulling what I would call a Morbius. Yeah, I know, that sounds really concerning, but just stick with me here for a second. Morbius is a straightforward movie. What you see is what you get. There are no curveballs, there's no depth to the movie, and the movie wants you to know from the literal get-go that Morbius's childhood friend is the villain of the movie. Now, I know you're likely concerned and you might be wondering why I'm correlating Morbius's awful storytelling to Constantine. Stick with me, this makes complete sense, I promise. In Constantine, Balthazar is constantly being sold as the big bad villain of this movie. He has beef with Constantine to the point where he pretty much despises him. He has a multitude of scenes where he's being sold as this character who's quietly pulling the strings behind the scenes. So you never really question if there's more than meets the eye when it comes to this movie's potential antagonist. Even when you do question that, this movie name drops Lucifer here and there to not only throw you off, but to make you think, oh, okay, Balthazar and Lucifer are teaming up to make Constantine's life a living hell. Then Constantine hits you with the perfect curveball. The character who has the least screen time seems to play the least important role in the movie, and the character you eventually forget about halfway through this movie is the big bad of Constantine, Gabriel. It's Gabriel who was the big bad villain of this movie, and when that reveal hit, my mind was blown. I genuinely didn't expect Gabriel to be the villain of Constantine. It might be an unpopular opinion, but it genuinely felt out of place. For a character with such little presence and such little importance, Gabriel makes this grand entrance in the very final moments of the movie, and it solidified my love for this movie. Gabriel goes so above and beyond with his plan that he tries to make Angela give birth to Lucifer's son to literally release hell on earth, and that leads to Lucifer having one of the best scenes in this movie by far, Lucifer's entrance. I don't care what you say, there is no debate, it's one of the best scenes in this movie. The funniest part though is that not only did Gabriel become human at the hands of Lucifer, but Gabriel's insanity also led to the exact opposite of what he wanted. Constantine gets to walk away with a clean slate and as a hero because he helps send Angela's sister to heaven. Angela walks away with supernatural powers. No matter how much Gabriel begged Constantine to kill him, Constantine chose the high road and decided to let Gabriel remain alive and stuck with humanity, the very thing he hated. For a movie that focuses so hard on supernatural elements, there was never a moment that really felt like something bigger was at play, and that's what Gabriel's reveal gave this movie. It's basically the perfect ending for this movie because along with the aforementioned things, it left a perfectly clean slate for a sequel, which of course leads me to the title of my video. Does Constantine really need a sequel? To be honest, yes, Constantine does really need a sequel, but truthfully, no, it really doesn't need a sequel. Okay, look, let me explain. If I'm being entirely honest, I don't have a definitive answer. There are perfectly reasonable explanations for both sides of this question. Firstly, let's start with why Constantine needs a sequel. Truthfully, I like Constantine. I do understand why it's a mixed bag of a movie. You either love it because it's genuinely up your alley, or it's simply not for you, which is okay. However, the reason why a sequel all these years later works is that the ending wipes the slate clean for Constantine. You can do so much with his story and his universe, since Constantine did get to walk away as a hero with an entirely clean slate. Does Constantine make decisions that doom him to hell again? Is there more story to tell for the supporting characters in Constantine? Did Gabriel's fate in this movie open up the door for more half-breeds, demons, or angels to come down to Earth to confront Constantine, which leads to another big supernatural journey? These are genuinely compelling questions that could legitimately have compelling answers, depending on where this newly greenlit sequel goes with this take on Constantine. Plus, this sequel could do a lot with John Constantine's personality and make him a slightly more fun character with more flair and enthusiasm, since that's what people love so much about Matt Ryan's take on Constantine. This, of course, brings me to the other side of this debate. Does Constantine really need or deserve a direct sequel? Probably not. Here are a few problems with the idea of this sequel. Firstly, Matt Ryan has done wonders in the role of John Constantine. It's at the point where he's basically synonymous with that role, just like some actors are synonymous with their roles in the MCU. It's hard for a lot of DC fans who are fans of Matt Ryan's Constantine to not side-eye the idea of Keanu getting a second shot at the role of Constantine just because of the star power and name recognition that Keanu brings to the table. Think about it. Even though we all love Keanu's getting another shot at this role over someone who has put multiple years of embedding himself into this role throughout multiple shows over multiple years, along with multiple animated movies as well. Matt Ryan has obviously put the work in when it comes to owning the role of John Constantine, just like RDJ, Chris Evans, and more actors and actresses have in the MCU. If anyone deserves to jump to the big screen for a Constantine movie, it's 110% Matt Ryan. But unfortunately, and frustratingly, star power matters. Secondly, I don't really think people care about Keanu's Constantine movie or his take on Constantine. It's not like this movie is beloved in any sense of the imagination. It happened, it came, it went, and I'm willing to guess that a lot of people haven't thought about it for years until this news recently broke. Despite what Warner Brothers may think, this sequel isn't anywhere close to what Marvel does with their beloved actors from recent beloved shows, which is bringing them back into the same role but canonized for the MCU. So no, Constantine doesn't really need a sequel. Hell, I'd even argue that need is an incredibly strong word, and that Warner Brothers was better off probably doing something entirely new with an entirely different actor for the DCEU's Constantine. However, this is our apparent timeline, so I guess we should be open to the idea, right? As for my overall opinion of Constantine, I genuinely like it. Its strategy of being slow, methodical, and patient enough to build its foundation for the sake of a payoff is one of the rare creative decisions in a superhero movie that ends up being worth the effort. However, it's fairly hard to ignore its long, overly wordy exposition dumps that are unfortunately necessary to understand both the regular world and supernatural world of Constantine, because they often get in the way at times. I could understand why a lot of people may secretly love Constantine, but I could easily understand why some people may genuinely dislike Constantine. As for a sequel, I can do without it, but I'm willing to be open to its upcoming eventual sequel until we see a trailer or hear more about its story. And with that, I will leave you with one final question. Do you want a sequel to Keanu Reeves' Constantine?